I've taken some not very kind attacks because I have approached this problem that we have as a war on sex. And I've made that point, I don't know how many times, and I keep getting slammed about it. But, let's just go through some of the facts here, okay? So I want to start out by telling a story about somebody in the Midwest between here and Minnesota. And this particular individual is 25, 26 years old. And this person is married and recently was given a plea deal, if you want to call it that way, for basically 3 years in prison, possibly more, depending on whether it's consecutively held or concurrently. Much larger number of charges were dropped, but this person had AI used against them in their particular case. Now, you recall about a year ago, I talked about AI and how the advent of AI has a number of bad things that you don't hear about. One of them is that police will be using it to generate images and create fakery and chicanery just so that they can get their convictions. And that's exactly what they've done here. Okay. Now, here's the really bad part. Some people think, well, you pled guilty, so you must be guilty. And I pointed out that, they present you with, 50 years, and then you're happy to plead guilty for 10, okay, even though you're not guilty. And they do this over and over again, and it's not just me saying it. You'll have defense attorneys saying it. You have retired judges saying it. So it's not something that's a mystery. It's only a mystery to people who don't want to open up their eyes. So this particular individual is going to try to get the best deal, obviously, possible for him. And what he wants to do, like many people who are innocent, is he wants to fight it. Well, one of the things that you have to do is you have to get from the other side, since they seize your devices and everything, you have to get the discovery. You have to get the evidence they have against you so you can defend your client. If you're an attorney, you're supposed to zealously defend your client. Well, of course, this is just one of those happy bullshit things that you have in writing that most people try to figure out a way around if there are any positions of power, like people are trying to do with our U.S. Constitution or state constitution or what have you. It looks very good in writing, but in actual practice, they violate it every chance they get, and so they are here. We're finding over and over again, one of the central problems we have is that the other side, the prosecution, refuses to give up the ghost on the evidence against you, called discovery. Okay, what they discovered when they arrested you. Okay, so why don't they want to do that? Why won't, for example, they give up all the chats? As in this case, as in many cases. Why won't they give up all the chat information? I mean, I've been pummeled the last few weeks with people who claim that they're reading the record. And folks, look, if it were as obvious as that, where you could just look it up, I wouldn't have a channel and I wouldn't be, quote, lying about it, as you keep saying. I keep saying that they don't have all the information in the record, and you keep pointing to what's there saying I'm lying. Are you not listening to what I'm saying? Okay, I'm saying they didn't allow a lot into the record. And I've offered for you to sit down with me and go over the record. But of course, you won't do that because you'll be made to look like a fool. And some of these prosecutors should be looking like fools because they are not allowing anything that looks exculpatory for the other side, the defendant. And the judges aren't forcing them to give up the ghost. So until we see more of that, we're not going to get fairness. Now, let's go back to the war on sex thing. Okay, so this is part of it here. Cheating to win, okay, so that you can pat yourself on the back and say, we caught all these pedophiles. And we have a 98% conviction rate. Well, guess what, folks? They've had that conviction rate for a long time. And apparently, the degree of influence against children is not decreasing. And yet at the same time, if you're wealthy and well-connected and powerful and maybe connected at the highest levels of our government, White House, right, etc., you're not going to go after those people, huh? or people with badges, or people with robes, or people with emblems of power, right? You're not going to go after those people. Here's a case in Fauquier County. There's a guy named Bobby Hicks who just pled guilty, and he was a science teacher and coach, and apparently gay or had an interest in young men, and had sent them shirtless pictures of him. He's this big beefy guy, this bear, gay people call him, right? And he's sending pictures to boys in that he's coaching and in his sway, and some are shirtless and some are his pictures of his genitals, and then he's pushing them and coercing them, and the police are calling this grooming. And some of the young men, the boys, felt uncomfortable that they had to felt that they had to comply. So he's up on charges. Okay, fine. He's going to get railroaded without a doubt. Maybe he should. Maybe he should. But then there's, in Fauquier County, don't forget Caitlin Grimley. Now, Ms. Grimley, you may recall, was situated where she had actual physical contact, like penis to vagina, of her 13 and 14-year-old charges boys in her math classes. She had 4 class 4 felonies, each one racking up 20 years each one. She could have spent 100 years at maximum. And of course, she was doing fabulous monkey sex with these boys in her car, in her classroom, in her home. And nothing, right? We have police officers, according to the Henry Wallace database, which is now defunct, at Bowling Green State University, who had, raped 13, 14-year-old girls and got probation. So we go back to this young man in the Midwest who's, in his mid-20s. He's married. He's never even had, hardly a speeding ticket. And he's going to get hammered with 3 to 5 years or so in prison, possibly more if it's done concurrently, that is together, or consecutively. He has to do this one, these years, and then these on top of them, and these on top of those. Like Ryan Pick here in Prince William County, who had 7 years, and he had no contact offenses. So this is what I mean when I'm saying a war on sex. But it gets even more complicated, because not only do you have inconsistencies and disparities in the sentencing guidelines and such, which they have tried to, deal with at various times in the history of jurisprudence, but you also have the attempt now to expand what has been known as child pornography to CSAM, right? Child sex abuse materials, which keeps expanding. Okay, you have some jurisdictions around the world which are now trying to create the idea that if you're reading erotica, so let's say you have an interest in children, and you mitigate that in some ways, and deal with your own urges by counseling, by support groups, and by reading child erotica. There's a group in I want to say Massachusetts, I ran across a few years ago when I was researching, and I would have it except for the fact that police have taken my most recent computer, 10 weeks, 11 weeks actually, still waiting for a charge. And in there, they have proposed a variety of ways for people to deal with their urges. And one of them is read stories. Read stories, get your rocks off that way, don't hurt anyone. And there are people who actually have these urges, who know that they have these urges, and that's how they deal with it. They have never hurt anybody. They just know of a way to deal with them. Fine. Okay. If we're going to shoot people, as some people have suggested, due to their irregularities, their impurities, there's going to be a lot of people shot, including the current occupant in high offices all around the country. You can figure out what I mean by that. So let's try to figure out a more constructive way to do it. But yet the police are going after, and politicians are going after now, sex dolls around the world that look like they're resembling children, small bodies, and maybe they are. Okay, so some kind of synthetic sex dolls that they're being used. Okay, so when see if we understand this, we're going to let police use AI to entrap people. That's going to be okay. But people who are trying to deal with their own urges through sex dolls and erotica in written ways, we're going to make that illegal. There's even some jurisdictions that want to make pornography illegal. And as I've said before, whether you like pornography or you don't like pornography, or you can't control yourself or what have you, you can make these things illegal, folks. But you're going to find that two things happen. Number one, the people who are forcing you away from this are, in fact, in many ways, the worst ones. Okay, we talked about the Republicans at the Republican National Convention, where they trashed the Grindr servers twice. They crashed those. I said trash. They crashed those. We can go back to the 1600s, where I think it was Cotton Mather, who was the fiery brand, um, uh, I'm sorry, the brain's not working fully today. The guy who was the Puritan is the word I kept saying, thinking Pilgrim, Puritan, who was out there fire and brimstone speeches. He'd go out into the forest. He had a cabin there, and he'd do his long sermons that went on hours and hours and hours, pages and pages. Well, guess what they found, according to Archaeology Magazine, of about, when did I read it? About 15 years ago? Underneath the cabin, when they excavated, they found a pit. And in this pit, they had all kinds of glass bottles of whiskey and rum and moonshine. Yeah, he was an alcoholic. That's why he went out there and did it. That's why. And Lord knows what else he did when he was out there. So, folks, let's dispense with the purity test, shall we? Because sometimes the people pointing the fingers the most are the most guilty. So we're going to now deal with the sex dolls, and we're going to deal with restricting pornography and written erotica. But we are not going to let the problem go. The problem isn't going to disappear. We're going to kill people. We're going to chemically castrate them like they're doing in Florida. It's not going to solve the problem. We have to get at the nature of the problem, right? Are we going to allow 15 and 16-year-olds to have sex and under certain guidelines, knowing that they're going to do it anyway? Are we going to criminalize that? Well, in Germany and in other places in Europe, they're trying to solve that problem. Again, I'm going to get castigated and attacked for pointing out the nature of the problem and what others are doing about it. Okay? That's what I'm going to do. I had this big long argument with the guy who was saying, what do you think is the age of consent? Young people can't consent, as if verbally they don't know what they are. Okay? I've already said we allow many young people to advocate in ways that I was not allowed when I was a youngster, for all your needs, and accept those needs, from what they're going to eat and what they're not going to eat and how they're going to, when food was put in front of me, that's what I ate, or I went hungry. Okay? But yet, when we get to a child's sexuality, if they're gay or bi or something, we're going to say that, yeah, we can, we'll try to convert them. We'll try to change them, right? So we have all these ridiculous things that we adhere to that impact what amounts to really a war on sex and sexuality. You're not going to get rid of this problem, folks. It's not going to go away until first you're honest about it. Why don't we be honest about the sex things, about what's really going on? We're criminalizing fantasies, okay? We are assuming that if the police weren't there, that person would have done something. We've allowed vigilantes to go after it, and we've said they may, quote, hurt people. You don't know that. You don't know that's what they're going to do in every case. I'm not saying you're not right about some of them. I've seen some of these horrible cases, but not everything is a Jacob Wetterling, Alicia Kozuk, and other cases. It's not. Those are the extremes which are used to justify everything you do for the vast majority, which are nowhere near that. Okay? So why don't we have, first of all, pull back from criminalizing fantasies a little bit and deal with the real hardcore issues? Why don't we restore some order and understanding that our Constitution has meaning? Why don't we understand that we can trust some of our young people to know what they really want, and that they're not going to make any more mistakes or be any more vulnerable than any vulnerable older person necessarily? Okay? Because what we're doing so far has not been working. Putting people in prison for communicating online is not necessarily solving any problems. Has the incidence gone down? When we're doing the research on it, the research says that the registry doesn't work, this list doesn't work, that not everybody who's online is trying to hurt somebody, that the typology of people who are acting online is not a criminal paraphilia extreme case like we keep being told. Maybe we need another approach, another way to look at the situation. And that's what I've said throughout. My channel is dedicated to looking at the proactive stings and saying they don't do what the police tell us to. And they're violating our rights over and over and over again. They're creating cynicism. They're destroying lives for nothing. If it's been okay for Caitlin Grimley to get a second chance and not go to prison, I totally support that. Then maybe for lesser crimes, we should have a similar punishment or penalty. Maybe that's the way to go. But don't tell me that Caitlin Grimley was okay. But this other person who didn't even meet anybody, that person should go to prison for 12 or 15 or 18 or 8 or 30 years because it's inconsistent. We've got people in places like Japan and Korea who are so wound up with their desire to be somebody in the world and to achieve what in their culture is success, which is often defined with financial success, which brings about a position where you can find a mate. Well, they're giving up on that. Instead, the sex doll industry, 5 to 15,000. I remember Lisa Ling did a presentation on that somewhere. I'm trying to remember where these the sex doll industry is exploding. Lifelike sex dolls. That's what we're driving people to do with this incredible amount of social pressure that we're creating economically, financially, socially, okay, sexually. That's what we're creating. It's not working, folks. It's just not working. And demonizing people out there and allowing others to demonize them has done nothing to mitigate the problem. And I hope you see that.